Tell her to take your shoes out and take your shoes out.
I need 6 guys.
Come.
Come here, Julia.
I think we're just waiting for. Hi.
How long is it? You have to start?
I don't know.
You play those guys?
Yes.
Yes.
For that and then give it to Basima.
Go down.
Up and down. So this is the left hand, with the right hand use this and make a big answer. Six ball with a space, just follow.
Yeah.
3 on either side. Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Om Namah Shivaya. గణపతి నిన్ను గణముగ ధ్యానము దేశ జనలకు గణమైన కాంతి ఇవలను మహదేవ నామ రూపము లేని చైతన్య రూపవానందమై వదన గణపతి గణపతి మమ్ము రక్షింప దేవదేవ గణపతి గణపతి ஓதகடாமுணர்ந்து ஓதற்குவரியவன் நிலவுலாவிய நீர்மலிவே शुक्लांबरधरं विष्णुं शशिवर्णं चतुर्भुजं प्रसन्नवदनं ध्यायेत् सर्वविघ्नोपशान्तये वक्रतुण्ड महाकाय कोटिसूर्यसमप्रभा निर्विघ्नं कुरु मे देव सर्वकार्येषु गजाननं निर्विघ्नं कुरु मे देव सर्वकार्येषु गजाननं बोधगणादिसेवितं कविते जम्बुवल्लसारभक्षितं उमासुतं भगुनाशकारं नमामि ईश्वरपादपङ्कजमो महाकायं दब्धगामिदासन्निभं लंबोदरं विशालाक्षं मध्यगणनायकं ओम श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः। ओम श्री चेंगय्या राघवन नामस्य शुभ गोत्राणु शुभ नक्षत्राणु शुभ रास्य अंत्येश कर्म पूजा करिष्यामि वर्ण पूजा करिष्यामि ओम श्री हरिश्चंद्राय शिव पूजा करिष्यामि ओम ब्रह्मादिमूर्ति नमः महाविष्णुवे नमः महेश्वराय नमः दत्तात्रेय मूर्ति दक्षिणामूर्ति नमः ओम श्री हरिश्चंद्र स्वामिने नमः। பெற்றதாய் தன்னை மகமறந்தாலும் பிள்ளையை பிறந்தாய் மறந்தாலும் முற்றதே கத்தை உயிர் மறந்தாலும் உயிரை மேவிய உடல் மறந்தாலும் கற்ற நெஞ்சகம் களி மறந்தாலும் கண்கள் இன்றி வைப்பது மறந்தாலும் நற்றவத்தவர் உள்ளிருந்தோங்கும் நமச்சிவாயத்தை நான் மறவேனே। சிவனே கதவை திரு காளியம்மா வழிவிடு ஓம் சாந்தி சாந்தி சாந்தி। We now going to proceed to hall number 2. Hall number 3. During the respects, come around the dais to greet the family, and then kindly take your seats. Thank you.
Good morning. Can you hear? Good morning, everybody. I hope I'm okay. I think I'm audible. Good morning, family, friends, loved ones, and comrades. As we all gather here this morning to really honor the life of Uncle Rogers, as many of us know in the family, and to some of you that know him as Chengiah, who really is and has been an extraordinary man, who's really lived life. And I think you can all agree that he has had an amazing life, relished in spending his time in the service of justice, freedom, and dignity. And for all of us, he really gave us the gift of time amongst us. Thanks. Uncle Rogers has really been shaped by the times that he has lived in an era of struggle, hardship, and courage. And really we take from this the courage element, because nothing was too big or too small for him itself. And from a young age, he understood that freedom is not given, but that it must be fought for. And he believed deeply in equality, solidarity, and the power of ordinary people in changing the destiny. And he stood on the forefronts of our political struggle, organizing, speaking out, and standing firm when silence would have been easier. He's of course faced fear and persecution, but he's never lost the faith in the dream of a free and democratic nation. And whilst he was in exile, he remained steadfast in his conviction. And we've seen how he has fought for the country, always used the platforms that he had available, and of course used the channels that he had and the people that he had to be able to change the lease of life and the conviction that he has had. And in his presence, people felt seen, valued, and encouraged. And this really is a very rare gift that he has had, and allowed for that speaking, for the different perspectives, and for those engagements to happen. Beyond the struggle, Uncle Rogers has always been a person of humility, humor, and compassion. And he's treated everyone with respect, whether a comrade or a critic. And certainly his life has always been one of inspiration. To all of us, being the niece in the family, he was not just an uncle. He was a mentor and a reminder that courage and kindness can coexist. And he taught us as freedom is just not political. It's a freedom to hope, to dream, and to live with dignity. And as we bid farewell, let us not only remember what Uncle Rogers fought for, justice, equality, and humanity, but may his spirit live in each act of courage, in every strand for what is right. And as he leaves behind the memories, he not only leaves the memories, but he leaves the legacy, the kindness that is taught in the compassion that has always been felt, and the strength that he has had through the perseverance that he's always shown. But more importantly, he has always shown us love and left us richer in having known him, and known in terms of the values that he has entrenched in us as a family and friends. And of course, this extends to not just family, but the friends that have become part of an extended family. Because Uncle Rogers never saw anybody that touched or anybody that impacted on his life to be just family or a friend. He always took you as family and always embodied you into everything that he's done. So whilst he's no longer with us in the body, but he's certainly in spirit, in the stories that we will continue to share, in the values that we will share, and in the love that binds all of us, that binds us to this person. And whilst his journey is complete, we certainly keep the memory alive in all that we do. So whilst he may be gone from our sight, he's certainly not from our hearts itself. And, concluding, I want to say what a beautiful thing it is when a life leaves behind not sadness, but inspiration. And that's truly what Uncle Rogers embodied. It's the inspiration that he's left with people, that when you met him for the first time, you certainly felt impacted. You felt impacted by his words, or by something that he said. I mean, when over the last few years, we've gotten to know Uncle Rogers. I mean, for the time that he's been in exile, of course, you never knew when you were going to see him. But when he knew that he couldn't see us, he went to a neighboring country and, of course, met with the family. And that was a really, really lovely time. I mean, we were just growing up at the time, but we really loved having to spend time with the family and having to spend time and listening to the stories that he always had. And he could turn, and take a story and really bring it to life. That, you sort of anchored in every word, wondering what was the next thing that he was going to say. And when he came back into the country, we tried to spend as much time as we could with him. And I recall when we'd go to Uncle Rogers and Auntie Lovell's house. Of course, I think all of you around the room know that, everything starts and ends with food. Of course, Uncle Rogers loved to cook and entertain. And so then the conversations became really the core of being able to celebrate life with food, family, friends, and love around that table itself. But every time we went to his house, he'd be like, we should just have a get-together. And you should just bring your good threes and we can sleep all over the place. But, it's the togetherness that he really wanted us to relish in itself. And I mean, who does this at 80 plus, goes to gym, just to make sure that he is not only keeping mentally and physically fit, but just, the mere fact of being able to keep that body and mind still so active. And even though in the last few years he may have had ailments, of course this comes with age, with everybody itself, but he really defied health, because I think the mind was so powerful in that, even if he was not well, he would still laugh about life. And I think these are the things that we continue to take with us, that, no matter what comes into life, because life is life, but that we should really embrace it with love, laughter, courage, and inspiration, and never let his lifelong struggles or lifelong dream of, taking conversations and the spirit in which it was embedded to heart. I think we all continue to use the different platforms that we have to be able to take those messages forward, whether we're young or old. And of course, my uncle had an impact on young and old. So it was never, I think he may have been old in age, but he was young at heart and in spirit. And so I think we must really take those things forward itself. And so I just thought that to start this particular formalities of, the number of you that are going to be speaking way after, the family itself. But I think each of you have an incredible story to share, and that's what we're really looking forward to, also listening to how Uncle Rogers has impacted, or how you all have impacted in his life. And then we all get to actually know him a little bit more than we currently have known him through life itself. And with that, I would like to call Danny, who is also the eldest nephew and eldest grandchild on Uncle Rogers' side, to come and say a few words. Danny, if you can come up.
Hi. Good afternoon to everybody. I'm Danny Maestri. I'm the eldest nephew of Uncle Rogers. I don't normally like speaking, but unfortunately, Auntie Laurel insisted that I come up here. I just want to speak on behalf of our family. I was just 3 years old when Uncle Rogers was deported from South Africa. And I saw pictures of my mom and them at the airport, and it really saddened the family when he left, and they didn't know what to expect when he was gone and when he was coming back. And when he came back in 1991, it was a big affair. The community got together. We had a party at our house coming back, and the ANC was at the airport. it was such a pleasure to bring him back into the country. And whenever he came back, he stayed with us in Sepingo, and that was his hometown. And if everybody knows Uncle Rogers, he loved eating outside, cooking outside, and doing everything, you know. And whenever he came, my mum made sure that my brother and I had everything for his stay, so that we could take him for all his meetings. His friends would invite him. And my mom went out of her way to make sure that whatever he liked to eat was prepared. So because she always felt that, you know, whenever he came, it would be a repetition of when he left, that she would not see him again. So she made sure that week that he was with us was special. And Uncle Rogers, while he was overseas, he still is a great inspiration to all nephews and nieces. He was there for us whenever we needed him to write a letter or a reference. I still have some of his letters that he's written for me as references, and I'll treasure that now. Excuse me. It's an emotional time now, so as a family, we've been very, very close, and we'll forever remember him, and he'll always be an inspiration to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Danny. As we had indicated that Uncle Rogers, you know, he loved bringing people together, and really food was not just food, but I think music and conversation. And he really was somebody that loved listening to different perspectives. So conversation was always really a key enabler at all these get-togethers itself. But of course, Uncle Rogers used to always say he would make the best chicken curry. But I think he really cooked very, very well. And of course, I'm sure, I mean, we can attest to that because we've had that, and my mom and dad, when they went to London, they themselves have had that. But I think we, of course, tasted in Auntie Laurel's cooking because you would never say that, you know, in terms of the cooking itself, it's traditionally how the Durbanites cook chicken and mutton curry. And I think those of you that had the pleasure of eating the food that has been cooked by Rogers and Auntie Laurel, I am sure that you will attest to that it's really delicious food that you've had the pleasure of eating itself. So I think with that, you know, some of the people that really have also been very close to Uncle Rogers, some of them could not be here today. For whatever reason, they could not be here. They also sent some of their speeches, some of their words that they really wanted to be shared with in testimony to how they've been impacted by his life itself. And one of the persons that I have their speech that I'm going to read out is Tamba Pillay. And so let me also just apologize in advance because my pronunciation is not the best. So if I'm pronouncing some of the names wrong, I apologize. But please bear with me with been written. And it says, my tribute to Rogers Ragaven. It was that I heard the my dear friend of over the last 70 or more years, Rogers Ragaven. I must say that I was surprised to hear that he had reached all of 93 years. I always believed him to be a younger, although my records show that we've been together as students as the then segregated University of Natal as early as the 1960s. He was a student activist of note and was his own man in the sense that lived his political beliefs without fear or favor. We served a stint together as colleagues in the same Student Representative Council, and although he was at the time a rookie student activist, he was no yes man. And despite general student opposition to cooperation or membership with the white-dominated National Union of South African Students. He saw no merit in alienating our student body from the general opposition to racist institutions and the entrenching of apartheid. He was not afraid to express his anti-apartheid stance and always prepared to go that extra mile to express his hatred of the doctrine of apartheid. And in many instances, we worked and cooperated in campaigns against apartheid in all its forms. A prized possession is a photograph of the 1960-1961 SRC of the so-called non-European section of the University of Natal. It shows a young Robert C. Ragaven, his first avowed foray into official student politics. As far as I'm aware, he spent his entire life thereafter as an avowed opponent of the apartheid state, and like many of us who lived our lifetime opposed to the apartheid state, Rogers was no exception. He suffered with dignity all the injustices heaped upon us by the hated apartheid state and never gave up the fight until Freedom Day. He richly earned the freedom for which we fought from a very early age. May he rest in peace, my dear friend, Judge Thamba Pillay. And I think a number of you in this room can share some of those sentiments that has been shared by Thamba Pillay, especially as he reflects on why my uncle felt that this particular fight and this particular cause was so close to his heart. And throughout his life, he continued to fight for that justice itself. So with that being said, I would also now like to call another person that's also impacted very much on my uncle's life, and that is Jairam Reddy, who is also going to be saying a few words. So if Mr. Reddy can come through to the stage.
Laurel Baldwin Ragaven, children Avi and Samara, the Ragaven family in Durban, ladies and gentlemen, I am deeply honored to share a few thoughts about the extraordinary life of Rogers Chengiah Ragaven. I first met Rogers in the mid-1960s when the assault on our freedoms in this country was intensifying through the unfolding of the doctrine of apartheid. Rogers was then an art student at the segregated part of the University of Natal, and he was elected president of the Black Students Representative Council, on which his dear friend Steve Biko also served. Shortly after being served with a banning order and house arrest in 1967, Rogers went into exile in the United Kingdom. While in the United Kingdom, he mobilized international support for the anti-apartheid struggle. The murder of his friend Steve Biko in police custody in 1977 and the declaration of apartheid as a crime against humanity in the United Nations deepened his resolve to continue with the struggle against apartheid. Concurrently, while he was engaged in the struggle against apartheid, Rogers acquired a string of academic qualifications and continued with teaching, with research and publications. I met Rogers again when I was doing my postgraduate work at the University of London in the mid-1970s. He often visited our home in Coulsdon in Surrey and became a family friend to us and to our two young children. It was then he came into contact with Laurel Baldwin. Coming in the car, my wife reminded me of that occasion. I think Laurel had just come to London and her friend was going away and asked Rogers to take care of Laurel in the meantime. That evening, we had invited Indras Moodley and his wife Kraba for dinner. And Indras was in exile, and we were very pleased that Rogers brought along Laurel to dinner that evening. We also had the company of Jaya Appalraju, who you remember. So it was a wonderful evening that we had, first meeting Laurel with Rogers. While after that, in 1976, I returned to South Africa to take up an academic post at the University of the Western Cape. We were pleased to learn that Laurel had become his life partner, and they had moved to Montreal, Canada, where Laurel began her studies in medicine. This, I think, was the defining moment in Rogers' life. Laurel, though still a young student, through her kindness, her warmth, her composure, and sober judgment, steadied the ship and defined a new trajectory for the Chengiah family. As in the United Kingdom, while Laurel carried on with her medical studies, Rogers continued with his academic career at both McGill and Concordia universities in Montreal. Rogers' charismatic personality and his deep commitment to social justice inspired a generation of students and colleagues. I was simply blown away as I listened last night on YouTube to the many tributes and compliments paid to Rogers on the occasion of his 90th birthday. It came from across international borders, from Montreal, from Vancouver, from Hartford, from Vermont, from New York, from Arizona, from Thailand, from friends, from relatives, and from professional colleagues. And they said, meeting Rogers was a life-changing experience. His integrity, his compassion, his sense of social justice, the kindest of the kind, not forgetting, as we heard, his culinary skills and warmth, entertainment that he and Laurel provided at their home to their many friends and colleagues. As the apartheid edifice began to crumble and the ANC was unbanned, Rogers returned to the country in 1991. He took up a post as assistant vice principal at the then Natal Technikon and was entrusted to implement a spectrum of transformative changes. Perhaps disillusioned with the creeping corruption in the new democratic South Africa, Rogers and Laurel returned to the United States in 2001, where they spent their next decade. But both of them returned in 2012 when Laurel was appointed professor and head of the Department of Family Medicine at the University of Witwatersrand. In his final days, Rogers walked around the Wits campus, talking to students, went to cardio gym daily, and spent time talking to people in the cafe. He was also given an office as a research fellow by one of their colleagues. His legendary interaction with students continued across the campus until his passing on Tuesday, the 28th of November. As I conclude, Chengiah Ragaven, fondly known to most of us as Rogers, was a very special person whose complex and intense life and travels are sometimes difficult to comprehend. A husband, a father, a brother, an uncle, certainly he was. But he was a lot more than that. A fierce proponent of social justice, understanding empathy and emotional intelligence, a lifelong struggle veteran, a charismatic personality, a person of immense warmth with an enduring smile, an academic, a world figure, widely traveled with an encyclopedic source of knowledge on a wide range of issues. When his passing came to the knowledge of the public on Tuesday last week, the outpouring of grief and compliments on social media has continued unabated. Laurel, Baldwin, Ragaven, Avi, and Samara, and the Chengiah family in Durban, I convey to you our sincere condolences and wish you fortitude at this difficult time. But you will be comforted by the exemplary life that Chengiah Ragaven shared with his family and the wider world across continents.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And I think, all of us take from that a little bit more and another piece of my uncle's life that has been shared here, just kind of revering over, what has been shared. Again, the fight for social justice and the fight itself in terms of just doing what's right and really at the heart of it, the integrity of it itself. So as we move forward as well, we'd like to now call upon Ms. Savla Devi Naika to also come and say a few words as well.
My greetings to Laurel, Samara, Avi, the extended Chengiah family, and all friends who are present and those who will be following on live stream. I'm sure a lot more people would love to have been here at this very important occasion. I feel deeply honored to be invited to say a few words. And as both Laurel and Chengiah says, and also Ian said to me yesterday, that I'm one of the people who's known him the longest. So while I'm a very old friend, I may not know him as well as many of you because our interaction was quite sporadic because of him going off into exile for so many decades. But I must say it was amazing that while I might have known him just for a year, when we re-met and reconnected, it was like we'd known each other forever and ever. He had that talent, and as Laurel does, of being warm and welcoming to everybody. So while we are saying farewell to our dear Chengiah, I've been reflecting on the amazing and talented person that he has been, a brilliant educator, as you heard, who inspired many generations, a philosopher, and I think that's what I loved about him, the conversations that took you in different directions and made you think about life in general. And of course, I think all of us know about him largely as a freedom fighter, and that he never ever gave up on what at the outset looked like an unrelenting battle that nobody could win. So I must say the fact that apartheid has been dismantled has been an amazing thing, and I'm sure largely contributed to the many people who fought the brave fight. So as a freedom fighter, Chengiah impacted on many thousands of lives. And also, we all know him as a loving husband, a loving father, brother, uncle, and a very good friend to all of us. He has been universally admired, respected, and loved by everybody who knew him. for his warmth, his intellect, his integrity. And just to give you some personal history, I first met Chengiah in the late 60s. I think perhaps in the year before he was forced to leave South Africa. I was a very naive, sheltered 17-year-old who just turned up in Durban from a very rural place where I lived a very sheltered life. And coming to university in the Black Medical School was really an education for me, a huge eye-opener. And one of the things that really blew my mind were the talks on freedom, the anti-apartheid struggle, and we had a common room at Alan Taylor Residence that everybody congregated in, the medical students whenever they had free time, and usually in the evening after classes, the students from the black section of Natal University, which was Chengiah, and then all the young student activists from Salisbury Island, which was the other campus. So those were amazing times. And Chengiah was one of the leading lights then. And together with people like Steve Biko, there were very in-depth and harrowing discussions on how to overcome apartheid, how we could gain freedom and equality for all the people of South Africa. And as I said, shortly afterwards, Chengiah left. But in the meantime, Steve Biko was, I'm sure, in contact with all the colleagues in South Africa and internationally, and developed the Black consciousness movement to what it became eventually. So I always think about people like Chengiah, Steve Biko, and others as really brave, selfless souls who fought for our freedom. And I must say, and I was saying to Ian, that those were really scary times because you never knew if a classmate would appear at the class, because suddenly they were captured and arrested by the security branch and detained under draconian laws. And some of them disappeared for months, some of them never returned. Really, really scary times. And the fact that people like Chengiah and Steve, who lost his life, can show you the caliber of our freedom fighters. So I must say it was amazing to reconnect in Johannesburg when Laurel arrived as a professor of family medicine, and I had already been there for a period as a professor of nephrology. We became firm friends. We supported each other in our leadership struggle, and there were many. And I think we really were good for each other. And we developed this warm friendship. And I was delighted then to go to the home and meet Chengiah. And Laura was absolutely amazed. And she always said I was this child prodigy who was his youngest and his oldest friend. So it was very interesting. And both Chengiah and Laurel welcomed me to the home in Johannesburg with an open invitation to drop by, and especially on Monday evenings for the vegetarian dinners, which were really sumptuous meals. And I was really impressed at Laurel's cooking skills, because at that time, I think Chengiah and I sat and chatted, and Laurel did the cooking, and we all enjoyed the feasts immensely. It was always a great pleasure to visit their home and feel immediately you're in a second home. You didn't feel like a visitor at all because of Chengiah and Laurel being so warm and welcoming to everybody. And in fact, those members of my family who came occasionally with me also felt very much at home and very fond of both of them. I wish to pay tribute to Laurel at this stage because I think she's been amazing. Both Chengiah and Laurel were an amazing couple, actually. And Laurel, especially, was always full of admiration for her, and more so in the last years of Chengiah's life, where he went through many health struggles. And Laurel did her utmost to make sure that he received quality health care and was well cared for. So thank you, Laurel. I think we all appreciated what you did for Chengiah. So in closing, my deepest sympathies from myself and my family to Laurel, Avi, Samara, and the extended Chengiah family and friends, and to say to Chengiah that you have fought a hard fight, a long fight. So rest in God's loving protection and enjoy the Valhalla that is reserved for our brave warriors. I'm sure he's sitting there looking at all of us and thinking this is a fun occasion and I'm sure he's here to hear this. You will live forever in our hearts.
Thank you to Savla Devi Naika for those really warm words. And as we heard a few of the speakers already, what comes really and echoed is the warmth, the love, and the friendships that have been shared, that have really also been the testament of long-standing friendships that have been in the room and that have spanned over decades of knowing this, not just the family, but Uncle Rogers through the years itself. So I know that we've had quite a few speeches of where persons have already spoken itself. So we're going to do something a little bit different now, is that we have a mic that we are going to take around the room. Anyone here that wants to share a story, share an antidote, or share something that has made them really feel that special bond with Uncle Rogers or the family itself. We're just going to take a few minutes to do that before we call on the next speaker, that's Sunny Singh, to the podium itself. But we thought just to also have the audience, because my uncle would have wanted, if you all know him and the way that we know him, when he had a gathering or a get-together, he would give everybody the opportunity to say something and to just listen in on the different perspectives itself. So we do have the mic. That is a roving mic. So anybody that wants to say anything, please, I know, a lot of you are emotional and may not want to say things, but we would all really love to hear a story or something that you may have shared with Uncle Rogers that we may not be aware of as well. If you want to say something, if you can just, I feel like I'm in a school or something. I'm going to say raise your hand so that we can at least identify you. But it's not for the purposes that we're in a school, but we just want to really hear the stories and the life that he's really, lived itself. So whoever is willing to be brave and courageous, like how my uncle is, great. We have somebody that wants to share a story. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you. I think everything that has been shared already, I would just want to reiterate. I had the privilege of coming over to Samara's house from when I was about 6 years old or 7 years old, and Chengiah and Laurel made me and anyone else feel incredibly welcomed, incredibly at home. He treated me, even though I was a child, he treated me like an adult from that age, asking questions of what I believed, what I thought about the world, why things were the way they were. And I would say that the effort that he made with every single individual to make them feel at home and also equal is an incredibly rare quality. He was warm and loving, and that shows through Samara's warmth, through Laurel's warmth, and I know his memory will be a blessing for us all, and his inspiration, not only what he did, but how he did everything in his life, will stay with us.
Is it on? Oh. A little bit non-conventional as well, so I'd rather rove with the mic. And if there's anybody else that wants to say something or share a story or share something with us, please, we would really love to hear it.
No, I just wanted to say that Rogers and myself had some adventures together. And I do recall that he was a bit naughty because I think he was not supposed to, but he used to love cooking a crab and shrimps.
And I think the fish curry.
To the bereaved family of Rogers friends, my name is Logi Naidu. I'm an ANC. I belong to a younger. Thank you. So I was saying that I belong to a younger generation of activists, freedom fighters in South Africa. There are many who had left the country and gone into exile, and we read about them. We read about the role they played in our freedom struggle. Just as we read about Nelson Mandela, who languished for 27 years on Robben Island. So today I've come to pay my tribute on behalf of my comrades and friends to the late Rogers Ragaven, his invaluable contribution to our fight for freedom and justice in South Africa. Indeed, all of us share his sentiments that what we see happening today, the greed, the corruption, and the looting of the state, is not something that we identify with. It's not something that we strove for. We still continue to embrace the principles as enshrined in the Freedom Charter, our fight for a free, non-racial, non-sexist, democratic South Africa. Go well, dear friend. We will always remember you as one of our freedom fighters. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Would you like to? I'm just going to stand with the mic, and I just want to see if there's anybody else. Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Muhyiddin Hussain from the Ilovo Barracks. And we knew Sir, but he didn't teach me. He did teach our elder brothers and families. Go well, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I want to say thank you for sharing those stories and some of those really precious moments that you all have shared thus far with us. And we're going to continue with some of the other speakers that we do have that are also going to be saying a few words. And I did mention that it was Mr. Sunny Singh that we want to call up now to say a few words itself.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Laurel, Tamara. Yes, a hero has fallen. While we say a bid farewell to Rogers, yesterday we paid tribute to one of the greatest leaders of our liberation movement, Oliver Tambo, South Africa, the museum at Mawira Stadium. Rogers was very special. He may have not carried an AK-47 as a modern-day guerrilla, but he turned the university classroom in the terrain of struggle. Rogers. Be they at the campus of DUT or Old Natal Technical and so forth. Quite, fiery situation. And I was honored, privileged to meet Rogers. And sometimes we should have some acrimonious debate and discussions. We should sway each other sometimes. But then, as a breather, we'll retreat to botanical gardens, have tea and scone. Right, Rogers. We had many romantic revolutionaries in our world situation. But Rogers was special, as other speakers were. Jairam was very vivid as well in terms of scholarly, anti-apartheid campaigner from London right to Montreal or Canada situation, leading hundreds of thousands of marchers. And it was the height of the Vietnam conflict then, 66, 68. Right? Americans were almost packing the bag and the Marines to go back to Washington or wherever they came from. So Rogers had a unique style in his teaching. He mixed politics with philosophy. I couldn't digest that. It took me a week. I go back to him. This is what you said. Can you simplify it, bring it to a lay person's understanding? And as I was coming to this place, I was telling Krish that, I think, don't misunderstand me. I don't know, I didn't find out the other side of Rogers, whether he believed in religion. But I think he was a deeply spiritual person. Laurel and Samara agrees with me. Sufficient consensus. Right? Yeah. So we bid farewell at the time, as Logi said, I've been 67 years in the struggle, right from the time of the Natal Indian Youth Congress. And to see the state of affairs in our country today, these commissions, ad hoc committee in Cape Town, all the exposures, how do you think we feel about it? Situation. You got the most senior cops become co-opted, senior corrupt, absolutely not an iota of dignity. So we need more Rogers. We need more Tambos. We need more Steve Bikos, to find a pathway to get rid of this, debt, criminality from our soil situation. So, in bidding Rogers farewell, I think we all got responsibility. Each one of us, even if you're not a member of the party, but be a true patriot. Hamba Gashla, Rogers, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for those words. And as we move forward in the next speaker, I know that the next speaker does have a poem that she would like to share with us, and it's Betty Govindan that's going to be coming through.
The dead are not gone forever. They are there in the paling shadows and in the darkening shadows. They are in the rustling tree, in the murmuring wood, in the flowing water, in the still water, in the lonely place, in the crowd. The dead are not dead. These lines from Senegalese poet Birago Diop speak poignantly to us today as we come to bid farewell to Professor Chengiah Rogers Ragaven. Greetings to all of you, to dear Professor Laurel Baldwin Ragaven, Shanti, Samara, and Avi and Hannah who are not here, but ladies and gentlemen, family and friends, comrades, I'm deeply humbled to share a few thoughts on the solemn occasion. We come together with deep gratitude to the universe that one such as Professor Chengiah Rogers Ragaven trod this earth and entered our history, not as a passive onlooker or bystander, but as an active, engaged, suffering servant of the people. And in his sojourn here, he made an incalculable difference to our world in his time and place. Professor Chengiah understood implicitly that the purpose of life is to find your mission and to fulfill it. And his mission was to help us express our common humanity boldly and unequivocally against all attempts, often violent, to denigrate, diminish, and deny it. It is oft quoted, but its value remains ever potent. Yes, Professor Chengiah's bosom friend, Steve Biko's inimitable words. In time, we shall be in a position to bestow on South Africa the greatest possible gift, a more human face, encapsulates the compelling purpose that guided him in different ways in our long walk to freedom. Professor Chengiah taught us with his fellow travelers that when you find your mission, you never betray it. Indeed, throughout his life and to the very end, he is a shining example of this, never wavering in his commitment to build a brave new world with tenacity, steadfastness, and integrity. In his honor, I've composed this impressionistic piece, and I speak on behalf of all the students and learners out there in the firmament. My piece signals a few signposts in Professor Chengiah's extraordinary life, a life that invoked the pantheon of voices spanning the breadth of the liberatory heritage across our land, this continent and the world, a heritage that shaped him and which he in turn shaped. Thank you. I'll read my piece now. tribute to Professor Chengiah Rogers Ragaven. You begin early, a child of the soil, this very soil. In the south of Durban, Reunion, where you were born, grounded, nurtured, and among the spaces of your early formation, Sastry College would serve to mold you into the warrior that you will become. Yes, your footprints are in Grey Street, as our beloved Phyllis Naidu would say, and across this land, continent, and our beloved planet, from south to north, east to west. You are simultaneously homeboy, Pan-Africanist, world citizen, giving and receiving from the bounty and largesse of your dream, the dream of a world beyond and without borders. In the relentless quest for roots, home, and belonging, as we beat on boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. Dear son of the soil, you taught us to live in the here and now. Sing redemption songs, songs of freedom. Emancipate ourselves from mental slavery. And in anguished tones you asked, how long shall they kill our prophets? Your creed occur with the people of the beloved country, Senzeni na. You cry rage as you rail against a land hideous with open graves, waiting for the slaughtered ones. You know that each generation must discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it. You lived through the moments that ignite the movement. 1960, Sharpeville. 1975, June 16. Words strain, crack, break under the burden. You endure confinement through house arrest, a prisoner within the walls of your home. You refuse to be tethered to the earth. Your constant prayer from Fanon, oh, my body, make me a man who questions. Yes, you are deeply grounded in place and time, and yet ever expansive, breaking free. Wrenched from your motherland, you become a vagabond for justice and for truth. Embrace a panoply of voices across the world. The irony of exile as it breaks down borders, and you embrace the world as your home, your homeland. In memory and in dream, you return to your native land again and again and again. Severed from the mountains and the sea, the fynbos and the grasslands, you long for the green, green grass of home. Where are the green fields where you used to roam? How do you sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? You achieve this through your ruminations, your intellectual inquiry, your lived, grounded, organic intellectual life, and in the largesse of your boundless hospitality, breaking bread together on far-off shores, in giving and in receiving. Your home a sacred space of giving and receiving. You reap bountifully as you sow so bountifully. You meet the comrades one by one, among them Rajas Pillay, prodigal daughter, who also gave it all for the struggle, until you set foot again on your native land. The return of the native. The new dawn breaks, the shadows lift, seagulls over the island singing, morning has broken. What endless joy as you approach the land of your birth. It seems that your love and you are racing towards each other for an eternal embrace. You spend the years of return sharing all you have gleaned, building the walls of the city, bulldozed by the past. Your constant prayer, where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls. Into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. Comrade Professor Chengiah Ragaven, rest in peace. You have fought the good fight. You have finished the race. You have kept the faith. Like a flock of homesick cranes, flying night and day back to their mountain nests, let all your life take its voyage to its eternal home in one salutation to God. Thank you. Hamba Gashna. Thank you.
Thank you for those words. And as we go further into this, we're now going to switch from quite a bit of Uncle Rogers's, life within South Africa upon his return from exile. We're also going to get a glimpse of his life overseas. And so I'd like to call Ian McDonald to come and say a few words as well.
Ulizinhliziyo zethu ziliqonde izwi lakho suza ubunyama.
Where to start? I wish to share with you just a few reminiscences of a friendship which lasted almost 50 years, or exactly 50 years. As you know, Chengiah, or Rogers as he was known to us all in England, came from a humble family, the grandson of East Indian sugarcane plantation workers. In a 1990 interview, Rogers said this: "My grandparents were brought from India under slave-like conditions. My father and I shared brutalizing factory work, and at an early age, I started challenging the state. At times, it was dangerous. There were interrogations, the kicking down of doors at 4 a.m, and you didn't know if you'd come back alive. And all this because I spoke up for human justice. My peasant background has given me a special perspective." Rogers and I first met on the campus of Sussex University in the mid-70s, where he was beginning to sound very English and spreading the virtues of a good curry. There seemed to be no limit to the number of guests at his dinners, but everyone was invited to help prepare the meal. That way, he awoke, he felt, the latent spirit of joy that he said is the human condition. During this time, he bought a tumble-down cottage on a Welsh hillside called Brynglas, where with Jaya and Tara, cousins of Gopika, we'd visit and camp there. It had no electricity, and you had to get water from a well up the hill. Such happy, carefree times these were. Chengiah was super generous and loved seeing his friends have fun, as I think all of you here know. He learnt a few words of Welsh and wanted his little cottage to be a meeting place for fun discussion, and ideas. Can you imagine a South African Indian man with a salt and pepper beard captivating local Welsh farmers in their pub? Well, he did this quite successfully, to the extent that when he returned there in 2017, having stayed with us in Oxford, and Laurel and Avi and Samara were with him, they went into the local pub and they were astonished. They all remembered him very well. Incidentally, around 1978, he'd met Laurel partly through me, and I think that was the luckiest thing he ever did. So inevitably, he felt the need to repay me. So at Cambridge, a year or so later, he told me about this beautiful girl who was obviously far too nice for me. But in his clever way, days before, he told her about a rascal friend of his. I was that rascal. And that beautiful girl has been my wife for 39 years. Unfortunately, she can't be here today. But by 1980, he left Sussex and collected yet another degree. And we joked that he had more degrees than the average vice-chancellor. And he'd moved on to Cambridge University. As most of you here know, Rogers exuberantly showed his love and would tell friends in letters, "You know that you have the love of a family here." I'm reading from letters that I've kept from that time that he wrote me. And he was a brilliant correspondent with, as you know, fantastic, neat handwriting. His core belief was pain can be liberating. Don't be afraid to say, "I love you." Say it again. Say it still one more time. They are the sweetest words in the world. For your love and friendship, Chengiah, my wife and I will never forget you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. And it seems that there's these common threads that keep coming up, the warmth, the love, the sharing of conversations, the sharing of food, and the sharing just of ideas. And in a home that's very warm and in a home where these qualities have been shared as well. So truly, truly, we also giving a glimpse and even more of the glimpse of some of those qualities that have carried throughout the life of Uncle Rogers itself. And with that, I want to call on the next speaker, who is Harry Narasimulu, to come and say a few words as well.
Good afternoon, family and friends, especially Laurel and Samara. It's a tough couple of days for you all, and my heart goes out to you. On behalf of a number of friends who I'll mention later who couldn't be here, but their thoughts are with you. I just want to, I was supposed to cover the period that Rogers spent at the old Technicontinental. I think I'm one of the only surviving members of that senior team. And I first got to know Rogers in the mid-60s. I was probably about 5 or 6 years old when my cousin, who's Krish Manikam, was teaching in Zambia then, brought Rogers along. They were friends at University of Natal, initially called UNNE, Non-European, and after agitation became UNB. And this bearded fiend, as we teased him, got on so well with my parents. They would speak Telugu at every turn. And I didn't realize how fluent he was until when I reconnected with him in the 90s. But be that as it may, as little children, we were quite enamored by this guy who would come home. My sister, who's a professor of English now, my brother was a radiologist, we were much younger. And they'd sit on his lap and he'll allow them to tease his beard. And they never had anybody, they never saw anybody with a beard anymore up to that point. So he was this friendly Uncle Santa Claus. Beard was black then. And when he went in and somebody said deported, I begged to defer. It actually was a one-way ticket. So I think he chose to go, having been banned and under house arrest in '68. And my parents went to the airport. I don't remember that. But I think it was very traumatic, obviously, for the Ragaven family. But I think for a lot of the other people around him as well, because Rogers was a legend, even at that point. And I'm sounding parochial here and maybe racist, but there wasn't anyone who actually went into exile, to my knowledge anyway, of the Indian network. I mean, there were obviously activists who had gone to the island by then, and Sunny was one of them, but nobody actually went into exile under those circumstances. Others chose to go without being banned and house arrested. And much later, telescope that in the 70s, 80s, where we obviously heard about Chengiah Rogers Ragaven acquiring these qualifications, and he became a mythical figure in terms of us. But we could relate to him because we knew him. You know, obviously he had grown much older. But how I got involved with him was when he came back into the country, and initially I was involved with the Mandela's call for those who were in exile who had skills to come back and help build the country. And that sounded very romantic, but I think it was very disappointing for people who really put their sweat in. It was actually, if I may say so, and Prof. Reddy would probably bear me out, and Sunny Singh and some of the more senior people, it really didn't work out that way. I think they were let down. They were sold a false hope. They came back and there wasn't enough done. I think there were two seminal issues before that. What Prof. Jake Skirwell did in at the University of the Western Cape, where he made it the home of the left, and Prof. Reddy was part of that, where people came back and they were given, I mean, not given, but they were afforded the opportunity to be on the payroll. They were able to contribute meaningfully, but still be activists in a sense. Prof. Reddy himself did that at UDW in the early 90s. And I was at Technikon Intel, which is a white Technikon. It became an Afrikaner Technikon before I got there. It was an English Technikon up to '84. It became a Broederbond-run institution from '84, and I got there in '87. And I'm just giving you the background. So in 1991, I became member of council. In '94, we had a black deputy vice chancellor appointed because the feeling was student affairs could only be handled by a black man, an African in that case. And that's how we recruited Prof. Ben Kwapa, who was part of the BCM Black Consciousness SASO movement. And he became vice chancellor end of '95. In '96, we were looking to recruit a whole range of new people. And I was part of that, thrown into the deep end. And Rogers was then at ML Sultan. And after the exile issue, he had worked there for a couple of years in two different roles. And we used to talk quite often because he and Ben Kwapa were friends from the '60s. And Srini Mudli, who most of you know who's late, was one of the original Ajahn provocateurs. There was Sats Cooper. I don't remember Sunny at that time, but there were others, Sunny Vengatratnam and others of that ilk. And those others who used to drop by were people like Amit Bawa, Adam Habib, Ruben Phillip, who was on our council, the past bishop. By the way, he's quite ill and he couldn't attend today and he apologizes. David Hempson was part of that vagabond crowd, as Dr. Betty describes it. I'm not sure that all of us agree with it, but these were constant visitors. But Prof. Ben made an issue of let's try to recruit people who are going to transform the institution without us shouting and screaming. So to that extent, we recruited a DVC student affairs in Prof. Kwapa's old position, was actually banned at UDW. I'm not going to mention names, but you know what I'm talking about. And basically tried to balance the team. But when this post of an assistant vice principal came up in '96, I was tasked by Prof. Kwapa to approach Rogers and ask him to make himself available. And he was aghast. I mean, obviously I got to know him again after he came back at Emal Sultan, and though I wasn't there. And anyway, we forced him to put in his application. He was ensconced in Cape Town because Laurel and the children were in Cape Town. And he put his application and he was shortlisted. He comes to the interview. And we have a panel which included the Vice Chair of Council, Beulah Davis, who literally built the Sharks Board herself, the Chairman of Council, Prof. Mazizi Kunene, Bishop Philip, Vice Chancellor Kwapa, Deputy Vice Chancellor Academic, Prof. Louis Duprier, and we had one hell of a fight. I sat there as a council member as well, and Prof. Kwapa wanted Rogers, irrespective that he didn't have a PhD, because he felt that wasn't the issue. I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritty, but we prevailed to have him come in. There were two posts. One was a postgraduate post. We brought in Nigerian David Olonche with a PhD in food science from Massey in New Zealand, Massey University, and the bearded old fiend, Rogers Ragaven, joined us. And we had a merry 2 years. But initially, and he didn't ask for it, his CV said Professor Chengiah Rogers Ragaven, and that's how we addressed him. And Prof. Kwapa was also the US. He was in exile for probably from the time just before Biko's death to 1990. So it was accepted that those in the US will carry the title. Whether they had tenure or not didn't matter. But we had a major objection from the Deputy Vice Chancellor Academic and the One Union. And we had to take it to council, and we overrode that at council. But by that time, the council had transformed in quite a way. We had Bishop Philip, Delisa MG, Sipo Shabalala, Voka Shabalala, later Judge President, Rosa Sarkin, who was a city councillor, Diri Naidu. So there was quite a, if I may say, a BC, SASO-orientated council. And I think they saw the value of what Prof. Kwapa wanted to do. So certainly it wasn't a big deal. And Prof. Ragaven had his office, he had undergraduate, and basically one of the big tasks was to develop the teaching and learning portfolio. Now, to about a DVC teaching and learning, it's the old DVC academic. But in those days, teaching and learning was relegated to, let's see how we're going to teach the students. And his old Cheng's attitude was, hang on, we're not going to do that. We're going to call the students in, SRC and others, and they're going to tell us how they want to be taught. Because it's teaching and learning, and that learning part is a critical part of the equation. It's not a one-way issue. Right? And for that, I must give thanks to both Prof. Kwapa and Reagan Jacobus. Reagan was had a legal background. He was a strong unionist. He was very student-orientated, but what Rogers did with the students was incredible. You know, he engaged them at a different level. Students saw this. He was actually a Pied Piper. If he walked through the grounds, and we had a garden campus, he'd have a whole group of around him who would be asking him 101 questions. So to avoid that meandering through the campus, we created and we didn't have internet in those days by then, we created a letterbox for students and staff to pose their queries in writing, and his PA will put it together, and he would then respond because he lived in Durban alone. He had lots of time. He used to fly to Cape Town every alternate weekend at that time. Obviously, he had his family, and he had the Apuraju family in Durban as well. So he had a network. There were a lot of people who invited him for dinner, including my parents and my wife. And so he was a regular guest on the circuit. And I mean, everyone knew Rogers. And if you invited him too early, the danger was he was going to come and cook. So you didn't tell him too early because then you avoided him coming and cooking in your home, right? But that student engagement, and I have a tribute, a verbal tribute from a guy who was our SRC vice president. And remember we were talking in the 90s, late 90s, what was happening in KZN? There was a huge internecine war in the rural, well, not only rural, but we had two campuses in Pietermaritzburg. So there's the IFP, ANC war, and that was coming onto campus. And here was Rogers, who would wade into the middle of those two. He and Reagan would walk into those quite heated confrontations and calm them down. To tell them, listen, guys, we didn't come this far with people sitting on Robben Island and, and we're going to have little petty issues over here. We had an incident at that time where the Mbonge Ngema made some comments about the Indians, Ama India. And we were looking to set up Inter-Race Institute, which David Hempson was proposed to head. And David would have been part of it. And the issue was to discuss it. And we had Chief Buthelezi as part of the steering committee and Bishop Philip. And there was some wonderful engagements. And Rogers instilled that it doesn't matter what party you belong to. We had PAC people. We had Sunny Venkatratam, who was a unity movement man. So it didn't matter what your political affiliation was. We're human beings, let's build, and let's get on with it. And if that institute only took off, David Hempson would have been the head of it. Rogers would have been involved because he already had a substantive post. And Ben realized that David would have retired, mandatory retirement when he got to 65 in 98, and the idea was to hold on to him into that institute, but David would start it. And David's brother is here, Crispin, who will speak on the heady days of the 60s when they were at Natal, and he'll also tell you, I'm deliberately provoking him to talk about the visit to the Chengiah's home, and I'm not saying a first taste of curry, but first taste of hot curry. But these guys were incredible. It didn't matter black, white, Indian, African color, but our students were the biggest beneficiaries of Rogers' largesse. And I'm not talking about financial largesse. I'm talking about his ability to engage. He could speak about anything. And one day he called me a polymath, and I didn't know what that meant. So I went and checked it out. And actually, he was the polymath. Rogers knew everything. Really, he knew everything. I don't know how well he knew English soccer, because we never got there. But certainly could discuss anything. And contextually, having Ben Kwapa, Reagan Yakovas, Rogers, David, Bishop Philip, the BC guys, Sats Cooper included, there were others in that fold as well, Prof. Ronnie Lynn Thompson, Jerry Musala, Rampele, there was a different grouping of people who didn't see things in narrow political issues. But Rogers was the one who held the glue. And in our council meetings, which he wasn't a member of, but he was invited by the chairman of council, first Prof. Mazizi Kunene and then Ruben Philip, Rogers would sit quietly and listen to the debate. And he'll make one comment at the end of that debate that will literally encapsulate it and, I don't want to say shut down the detractors, but literally encapsulate what we should be doing, why we should be doing it. And really it was all about being student-centric, We had, in 96, we invited the then Deputy President, Thabo Mbeki, to be Chancellor. And when he came onto campus for the inauguration weekend, he spots in the corner the gray-bearded fiend, and he walks across. Now, if you all know the then Deputy President, now ex-President, he's a very starchy guy. But he walked across the room and gave Rogers a big hug, and they went on small talking about to each other, because they went back to Sussex in probably 79. Prof. Jairam and probably Laurel know that better, those details. And there was an instant rapport, and it broke the ice because we had 3 functions that weekend. We were worried how we're going to manage with. We had the cantankerous chief from Mashlavatini there. We had others from the PAC. We had ANC stalwarts. And it was going to be a tough one, but Rogers cracked the ice because he knew Deputy President then, Mbeki. The same happened in 98 when we had the non-aligned movement conference in Durban. And thanks to Yogan Mudli sitting over there, who was a Communist Party stalwart, we hosted Fidel Castro on our campus. And the reason we brought Fidel Castro, we allowed the SACP to have interaction with the local members and the El Presidente, was we wanted him to address our students. And he walks into the room with his bodyguards, and suddenly he makes a U-turn, he goes to the left, or it had to be to the left, I guess, because he spotted this bearded fiend. And he never met to my knowledge, he never met Fidel before, but I know the story that he wanted to move to Cuba after London. Laurel wanted to go to Canada. Fidel Castro goes up to him. I'm sorry I'm using first names like this. And through his interpreter said, I know who you are. I know your struggles in Canada. And I know what you've done. And I mean, there's incredible electricity in the air. But you know, the students then saw, if they didn't see it before, that here's somebody who's been at the center of the universe almost for 20, 30 years. So we were lucky, you know. I mean, I think the biggest issue was that at that time, the then University of Natal didn't recognize him. And he wasn't, I wouldn't say he wasn't happy, but we tried to engage with them about honorary doctorate. At that time, we didn't offer honorary doctorates. But the powers that be didn't really engage with us. And by the way, I'm going to use this colloquially, but Rogers conned me, because I was his line as such, to sponsor his master's in religion, theology, in 1998. Now, here's a guy who's got a string of qualifications, still wants to study religion at the age of 65. I'm not, you know, I went to Prof. Kwap and I said, Prof, this is it. He says, you pay. He says, I don't want to know about it, you pay. Because Rogers was a continuous learner. And you know what he did to our students? And Beking Kube, who's an author now, was the guy I was telling you, the SRC student, who's written a brilliant book, which you guys will enjoy, the Love Diary of a Zulu Boy. Comes from my FB household. But the person who turned him, and he always credits Rogers Ragaven, from a writing perspective, from a political perspective, from a humanistic perspective. And towards the end of his stay, he went to Rogers and said, I met this white girl. She's a senior lecturer in sociology at the local university. Do you think I stand a chance? And of course, Laurel's proof of what's his answer going to be, you know. I know I'm taking too much. I'll get off the stage. But I think in terms of our transformation, it wasn't about just black and white and having more black people on the deck. What Rogers did for us was transform the way we taught, the way we interacted with staff and students. When it came to student mentorship and staff mentorship, we had people jumping out of the woodwork to be mentored by Rogers Ragaven. And that mentorship took a formal issue and an informal issue. But the incredible issue was Rogers was not supposed to lecture. That wasn't his mandate, to be in the classroom at any scheduled time. Yeah, so as part of Rogers' job description was never to lecture. He was not involved in formal lectures. He was not scheduled. He was not timetable. But Rogers was always willing to engage in a class. He would ask to go and teach journalism students. And for the first time, and we had Ashwin Desai on board as well at that time, the students were learning about political science. Journalism students were never taught political science. I mean, I'm sure you're thinking in your mind, how the hell journalism students don't understand political science? And we had Sunny Venkatratnam, Rogers, and Ashwin, among others, come on board and go through that. But the other amazing thing about Rogers, and I don't know whether it's actually true, and Laurel can verify this, whether it's true, he never taught the same subject twice, because he kept on changing his curriculum and the syllabus. It always updated. I mean, it's crazy when you think that most lecturers go into the classroom with notes that are 20 years old. Probably the notes that they were taught by their lecturer. But here was somebody who was always updating it. So the issues of the current affairs were incorporated in that lecture. And I mean, it was a fantastic laboratory. It was a dynamic laboratory. You know. Anyway, I think I better zip, because there's just so much to say. And I'm so grateful to have known him. I have to say this, that I think Laurel needs to be acknowledged and thanked in so many ways, because Rogers couldn't do what he did if it wasn't for you. The strength, the support, unfettered issues. And I think not enough can be said about that. Thank you.
ഒരുമയോടു കൂടി ഒഴുകി വന്നിടുന്നു ചരണ പങ്കജങ്ങൾ പണിയുവാൻ വരുന്നു.
Thank you, Harry. And I think we got a lot more of a glimpse, more than a glimpse actually, of the strength and the courage and the conviction that Uncle Rogers played in raising some of these very, very difficult conversations. But I think what we do give a sense of, and I think it's really his ability to engage, his ability to establish, maintain, and strengthen these relationships, and bringing everyone to the table itself. And I think discussing things where he had a skill also in terms of listening. And I couldn't agree with you more because, you know, when they say that in order to be able to take forth these particular struggles and these particular conversations and these particular topics that Uncle Rogers did take forward, you have to have a very, very, very strong support system behind you. And I couldn't help but concur, and I think a number of people that know Uncle Rogers and Auntie Lovell and Samara and Avikyle, and more specifically Auntie Lovell, in the role that she has played in Uncle Rogers' life. You know, not only in terms of having the togetherness of being able to live life in the way that they have lived it, but I think the support structure, and we've seen this more over the years, and especially in the last few years, in the type of support and in the type of way that Auntie Lovell has supported Uncle Rogers, even during his very trying times with his ill health. So you're absolutely right. You know, it's the role that the support structure plays in these lives that, of course, are legendary, but I think even in the quiet moments, the people that play behind the person that's at the forefront should be acknowledged and should be recognized. And we couldn't say a more bigger thank you to you, Auntie Lovell, for the role that you've played in Uncle Rogers' life itself. And now with that, I'd like to call Crispin Hempson to say a few words.
പരമപാവനം പൂങ്കാവനം കടന്നു വരികയായി ഞങ്ങൾ അരികിലായി ഞങ്ങൾ വരികയായി.
So, greetings, and I bring you my. Sorry, it's a bit difficult. My apologies for my twin brother, who's really not well, but the prognosis is good. And word of David, who is in his right at the end of his life now. He would, of course, have been here. He would have loved to have been here if he'd been able to do that. He was at least able to be alive yesterday when his first grandchild was born. And he was able to respond this morning when I showed him the picture. So I think for me there was an accident that happened in 1966. I was an 18-year-old in my second year at Howard College campus. The accident was I had a timetable clash of all kind of mundane things, which meant that I took one class a week at the city buildings campus right in the middle of the market area. At that time, it was a campus of the university. The building, Oldham House, is now sadly completely derelict. But it gave me this fantastic opportunity to be on a campus where there were still students who had registered at the university before the Act in 1959, Extension of University Act, which of course meant not extension but narrowing down of universities and ethnic segregation. And of course, Rogers was one of those students. And every year, Rogers would take some more credits. And he stayed on as a student for a number of years, a student of the University of Natal. I mustn't talk badly of this. I'm a bit of a slow academic achiever myself, having got my doctorate just over a month ago. So Tony Morfitt, whom a couple of you would have known, taught this class, and I was interacting from time to time with the students there, and I'm sure that's how I first met Rogers. But on the 16th of May, 1966, I know this because I've got a diary, and I read my diaries to find all of these references. Rogers had, of course, invited me and some other people involved in NUSAS, the student organization of the time, to a meal at his house in Isipingo. So we arrived at City Buildings, me with somebody else's car, and Rogers came. He had a Mercedes. Don't put too much store on the Mercedes aspect. We actually had to push it to get it started. And then he led us through to Isipingo. And we were ushered into his room, and the most amazing meal, just the most amazing meal, and Harry is of course correct. This was the first time this kind of green behind the ears, white boy had really tasted proper curry and this marvelous array of vegetarian dishes, which completely impressed me. So the evening was about hospitality, humor, and debates about ideas. We talked about, as it happened, jokes. We talked about NUSAS, and we talked about religion. And we had a debate about moral absolutes. I took a position on that issue that I would never take now. But and then the person whose car we'd come in drove us at 80 miles an hour, like 130 kilometers per hour, back to the Howard College campus. We were organizing a protest for the next night. Ian Robertson, the NUSAS president, had just been banned. So, and Rogers was at that protest, which took place the next night, with other leaders from what was then UNNE, as Harry explained. And the same leaders were there again just on the 7th of June when Robert Kennedy spoke at the Students' Union on the Howard College campus. And if I'd only been able to give him some advice on how to raise your boy child, that would have helped, I think. And so from then on, I would interact with Rogers, sometimes at City Buildings when I was there, but increasingly more through NUSAS, the activities of NUSAS. And there was a famous Congress, NUSAS Congress, which has been much debated in 1967 at Rhodes University, which was where there was serious collusion with the malfeasance of the apartheid government. But I absolutely remember Rogers giving a fiery speech there and saying, "I speak on behalf of 17 million oppressed people." The numbers have, of course, changed since then. But it was a great moment. And so over that period, we would often interact, and there was always this warmth and humanity. And then, I'm not sure the exact date, he was banned, late in 67, I think it was. But it was only in March, because of the reopening of the school, the university year, it was only in March that we were able to have a protest meeting at the Alan Taylor residence of the medical school with the student body for that SRC. It was a remarkable SRC. I have that photograph with of course, Rogers as a president of the SRC, Steve Biko, Benon Gubane, Paul David, and others. It was an incredible time. 1968 was as dramatic here as anywhere else in the world in terms of student politics, and got us all into various kinds of trouble. So the fact that Rogers was banned didn't mean that we stopped interacting. In June 1968, I noticed I helped Roger work on an English essay. So Rogers was still studying, and we were interacting a lot in New South. And then after that, partly I think because of the banning, but more because I went overseas, I then was sent to teach in rural parts of the province. I didn't really see very much of Rogers. I must have interacted possibly once or twice on a visit to the UK, I think. But I remember perhaps 15 years ago when I was working at the Emil Salton campus, walking into the foyer of the main entrance and finding Rogers there. It was such a nice, warm meeting to have him there and to be able to interact with him. So for me, I think it has been a memory always around those points. That phrase, bring to the table. Well, it wasn't a table because we were eating on the floor, but that idea of coming together to interact, and the sense of humanity. And I often think, would I have done things differently at that time? And I think I would have done some things differently if I was going back to it now. In terms of focusing more on the humanity of our struggle than always the constant having to politic so much of the time. And that sense of being with other people was a sense that Rogers brought. Ubuntu may be an African concept, but we knew exactly what it meant with Rogers. So, thank you.
Thank you, Crispin, for those very warm words as well. And now, whilst we've heard and learned from quite a few people and got even more glimpses into Uncle Rogers' life, we're going to now take it into a very personal and a very intimate space in terms of the next speaker, who also happens to be Uncle Rogers' daughter, Samara, who is going to come and share the life that she's led with her dad and her family.
Thank you, Rashmi. So as most of you know, I'm Samara. I'm Chengiah's daughter, and I've been asked to speak on behalf of my family, so it's quite a big honor. I thought about what to say for a long time and questioned whether or not I should write something down. But in the spirit of my dad, who gave many speeches, he often said, you should speak from the heart. So I've decided to kind of bring that into the room today. And I know that we've had many speakers talk about his political activism, his commitment to social justice, his incredible kind of radical thinking, his maverickness. But I wanted to speak a little bit about a more personal side and a familial side, which I think is rare, because I think political activists often have these kind of external personas that don't always necessarily match with their familial values. And my father was amazing because he often would talk, of course, about the revolution and, kind of being very strident, but he would always talk about love and how important it was to love, right? And how it's radical to love. And I think as his child, just like Maya said, he would treat me from a very young age, he would treat me like an adult. He would engage, he would ask me to push back. And in fact, Maya and I wrote a book when we were kids, when we were 6. And my dad said, we must introduce you to Roshila. She works for Oxford University Press. And so Maya and I had a meeting with Roshila at 6 years old to talk about a book deal. I think that's what my dad, his incredible capacity to not only bring people together, but to lay a foundation of respect and love, which is so rare, right? To actually, especially as a man, especially where he came from, especially given masculinity, he loved people, truly, really loved them. And I think most of you know that my dad and I had a very special relationship. I think we can all say we had special relationships with him, so I'm happy to share that. But we had a very, very, very close bond. And I think, it's very difficult to think of a world without my father. Very, very hard, because he was very special. And, in his later years, I just wanted to end on this note. When I was watching him decline, which is never easy to watch a parent decline. I think it's very hard. But he was using his walker, and we were outside in their house in Parktown, and we were having a conversation. And he would still say to me, Samara, when I say, how are you doing? He would say, well, when you look at the state of the world, and you look at the way that I'm living now, I can't complain about anything. There's nothing I can complain about. And the night before he died, when I said to him, how are you feeling? He said, wonderful. I'm feeling wonderful. And so as we were walking, and he was walking with his walker, and we were having a political debate at 91, he said, no, wait, stop, Samar, we have to stop. And I said, what? And he said, look, there's an ant crossing the ground, and I don't want to smush it. And we have to let the ant pass. So from the ants to the kind of larger, political personas that we know, to anybody, my father respected everyone, and treated everybody with a deep care and love and respect. And I hope we can all continue that legacy, because it's very rare. And I feel grateful to be his child, and the world will just be a bit sadder without him. So rest in power, Dad.
Thanks, Samava. And I was going to say, I recall sometimes when we used to sit with Uncle Rogers and Auntie Lovell and Samava and them at lunch, and actually those words that he had said when you asked him how he was feeling, and he'd be like, wonderful, wonderful. And, in that voice that he used to say it in, and, whilst you say everybody would complain, and you think to yourself, what are we really complaining about? Because we are really truly blessed to not just have had him in our lives, but I think truly blessed with the life that he has led, that he has shared, and that he has taught us that, in life we should really truly be grateful. Grateful for the small and the large things that we have, because in the broader, bigger scheme of things, I think nothing compared to the life that, he tried to have us aspire to, and this was everybody that he came into contact with itself. I think, he himself would have wanted us to have less complaining, more gratefulness, and really taking those lessons and those fights, that he shared so passionately about, to be able to take it forward in our own way itself. So that just, in terms of what was shared, was always shared at a table, or was always shared in conversation itself, because he really didn't think much was gained when you complained. And it truly is. I mean, how much do you gain by complaining? It just takes away the energy that you have, that you can redirect and repurpose into the life that you're living itself. And so, with that, I know that some of the people that have come through even later in the timing that this particular function or this particular funeral has been itself. So I'm going to do, before we close out this session, one more allowing the audience or allowing the people that have come through that if you want to share a story or antidote or something that reflects Uncle Rogers's life, this is also the time to be able to be sharing it itself. And so earlier we did have one round of, having lots of people share something with us, and we're going to just do that quickly again. So I did say I didn't want to feel like a teacher or feel like I'm in school, but for those that do have the courage and do want to share something with us, if you can just raise your hand, and we have a roving mic that we'll bring to yourselves. But I think the whole purpose of this was really to, again, like Uncle Rogers did, brought everybody to the table or had everybody be given an opportunity to share and to converse. We really want to take that in the spirit that he would have wanted to. And his spirit being here, we want to be able to reflect that in the way that we're undertaking his last rites as well. So I see Uncle Madhu he wants to share something with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. A very sad day for me today. I find it a bit painful to say a few words, but I can't let Rogers go without sharing one incident with you. We were the closest of friends, very thick, and we were part of a group of students who attended our university classes in the Warwick Avenue Triangle. Our university was a converted warehouse, converted into classrooms. The University of Natal, non-European section, and that's where we graduated from. Rogers, a lot of wit, a lot of humor. He could have a go at me, but I could also have a go with him, And if Laurel was on my side, he didn't stand a chance. And I want to share this one humorous incident that took place with a friend of ours, Hudson. Rogers was getting ready to go back home to Canada for a while, and we were trying to organize a ticket for him. And finally, we got a special deal for him, and he takes out a credit card to pay for it. And I said, Rogers, but that's a capitalist instrument that you're holding, And he didn't say a word, but he used it to get his ticket, I had to share this with you. But lots more I could say, but I'm sure somebody else would want to say something. But to Laurel and Samara and Avi and the Maestri family, I share your grief. And to Rogers, bon voyage.
Thank you. So I don't know if there's anybody else that wants to say something. Okay. So I just wanted to say that, everybody that shared... Oh, somebody wants to say something? Oh, yes. Please.
So, about my Uncle Rogers, it's hard. It's hard to talk about it. But my wife's only known him for 2 years. And she wrote something that really moved me. And I thought I'd read it. A library burns. An old African proverb reminds us that when an elder dies, a library burns to the ground. Today, as we gather to honor and remember Uncle Chengiah Rogers Ragaven, we stand among the ashes of a library rich with stories, struggle, and spirit. Born on the 18th of September in 33, in a season of spring and lush beginning, he entered a world awakening. And through the course of his 92 years, he became part of its awakening. When he breathed his last on the 20th of October, the world felt quieter. The wind shifted. For those who embraced him as a comrade, lecturer, friend, father, son, brother in arms, the season changed forever. The scholar and the struggler. From the earliest days of apartheid's cruelty, Uncle Chengiah's life was interwoven with the pursuit of justice, education, and equality. He was both a friend and a political teacher, one who never allowed the bars of oppression to silence his conviction. The endurance of spirit when dignity was denied, the deep belief that knowledge, not vengeance, was the key to liberation. Through his lectures, his activism, and his unwavering moral compass, he shaped minds and opened doors that had long been closed to so many. His work was not only resistance, it was restoration. He helped build the foundations of a future where education would no longer be a privilege of the few, but the right of many. A legacy of service and sacrifice. From this and many other acts of service, generations that stand here today have education because of him and others like him. The universities, schools, and freedoms we sometimes take for granted are built on the shoulders of those who fought for learning in the face of oppression, who believed that the classroom was the battlefield of its own, and that every student who could think freely was one more victory against tyranny. Because of him, and because of sacrifices of countless others, we are able to study, to teach, and to dream, and build lives of dignity and meaning. His life's work was not just political, it is profoundly human. He gave others the tools to rise above the injustice that sought to define them. Elders love to tell stories, if only we ask. Uncle Chengiah told them, not for his own glory, but we might remember the price of freedom and the duty of humanity. Through his stories, we learned of dark nights and of bright mornings of possibility, of comrades lost and victories won, and of the laughter that survived even in the face of brutality. Books on shelves don't tell stories. We have them open and read them. We have to open them and read them. Uncle Chengiah was that open book, waiting for us to listen, to learn, and to carry forward his wisdom. A personal reflection. When I had the fortunate stance of meeting Uncle Rogers, he sat in the glorious garden of both his and Auntie Laurel's home in Johannesburg. His well-known cricket hat fitted snugly, and a fantastic scarf draped around his neck, a cup of tea, and a newspaper resting gently on the table before him. As I sat down, and my now husband Wooly introduced me, he looked up and smiled at me with his entire face. For me, my favorite feature was the way the sunlight caught his luxurious beard, a small but unforgettable moment that captured the quiet dignity of the man that he is and will always be to me. He asked me one of the first questions that would come to define every conversation we shared. So, when will you write your book? I remember pausing a little in awe, although I later learned he asked many people this question. his sentiments still hold it dear. Writing had always been something I felt deeply called to, and somehow he saw that before I could even articulate it. Today, I write not a book, but a small note for you all, pieces together with his steady voice as my guide. Had I known how little time he had, I would have asked him so much more. Yet in that brief time, I learnt more than just his greatest loves or heartaches. I came to understand the depth of human spirit and what, to me, so strongly embodies Ubuntu. In his spirit, I ask today that in all that is lamenting, that we hold him in the highest regard, not only in remembrance, but in practice. Let us take his life and his learnings as a call to continue the cause that brought him and so many others through trial, tribulation, and triumph. Let us remember that the struggle he often spoke of was not merely political, it is deeply personal, profoundly communal. The struggle, as I came to understand through him, is not to walk alone, but to steady ourselves, walk alongside those who pace and slower, to continue defining excellence in service, not only to those familiar to us, but to those awaiting the dawn of a new day. Today we celebrate that dawn, and in his strength, his humanity, and absolutely beautiful life he lived alongside Auntie Laurel, his stunning children Avi and Samara, and all those he loved so deeply. He took each day like new innings, with a happy smile, a courageous heart, and the unwavering will to play until the very end. Now, as one of our greatest libraries closes in its final chapter, we remember that every word he spoke, every act of courage, and every lesson shared still lives in us. He taught that freedom is not only inherited, but it must be renewed in every generation, and that education is not a privilege of the few, but the weapon of the wise, and the love for one's people is measured not by words, but by work. In this change of season, let us reopen this page. Through memory, through story, through the continuation of his work, let us honor him by living as he did, with courage, intellect, humility, and compassion. For in doing so, we rebuild, from the ashes of one library, 1,000 more. From Vuli and I, the deepest love and thoughts go to the Baldwin and Ragaven families. During this time, know we stand with you, as times ahead will test you, but with now a spiritual umpire in the heavens, always believing he will come to meet in peace, calm, and our own renewed strength, and the ability to live once more in a cherished life amongst you.
Thank you for those words. And I think, as we have echoed and have learned from so many people that have shared their stories, shared their lives, shared, how Uncle Rogers has impacted, or has been impacted by many people, and actually all of the people in this room who have shared a very, very special bond with him itself. So with that, we coming to the conclusion of the speeches, and of course, we want to call Auntie Lovell, who wanted to do the vote of thanks, and we're really, really very appreciative that even with everything that's going on itself, that she is able to do this with us.
Yeah. Everyone who has come here to honor Chengiah, to everyone who is online, and to all those people who I know would like to be here and pay tribute, I just want to say thank you. Our life together, and I'm not going to give a speech, has been almost a half a century. And it was a very unlikely union, especially for that time back in 1976 when we met at J. Raman Vata's house, the first time I ever ate curry. And it has been probably, I think, an exceptional life. And we were a team until the very end. And people may look and say, well, what held you together? And in Judaism, we have something called tikkun olam. And our belief is that God created the world imperfect, on purpose. Why? Because there was a belief that there is a duty to repair. Because if we lived in Valhalla, Nirvana, paradise, I'm standing on my tiptoes because I'm just having a little bit of challenge with the height. Then what would we as humans be here for? Why was it necessary to create human beings? And I'm talking about whether it's scientifically, because as a physician, of course, we believe in evolution. But however we got here, what is the role of the human and to be human? And so before I invite you to join us for tea and snacks and everything up by the Ghat, and a lot of you have already said this, I think Chengiah's life represents a challenge, an admonition, a cajoling for us to be more present, live more fully, to be actively engaged in everything you do in a thoughtful, critical, and yet joyous way. So to live more joyfully, to live more fully, to live, as Ian and many of you have said, within Samara, with great love, because that is a radical act. It's radical in today's times to love, truly love. And I think that's what our marriage was about. Even when he, as some of you might say, lost himself, but the essence was always still there. So with that, I love you all. Chengiah loves you all. And your bravery, your courageousness to carry on with life with the message that he's all given us together. Thank you, and great gratitude, really.
Thanks, Auntie Lovell. And I think, all of us sitting in this room fully know, the deepness and the depth of the love that Uncle Rogers not only had for his family and friends, but has shared and constantly always told us that, when you love deeply. And when you love, the depth of your love will be shown through the actions that we all undertake. So with that being said, I think all of us got a lot more glimpses into Uncle Rogers' life, but we also now have come to the point of where the priest is now going to be handed over back to the priest for a few of the rituals that would need to be completed. So I'm going to hand over back to the priest itself.
Wozapela usondele mawusize inceku yakho ekufundiseni kwayo mawehlisa umoya wakho phezu komphefumulo wayo, vula izinhliziyo zethu ziliqonde izwi lakho, susa ubumnyama ezweni, siphe ukukhanya kwakho.
ఇక్కడికి వచ్చిన వాళ్ళందరికీ నా ప్రియమైన నమస్కారం. My humble greetings to everyone present here this afternoon, those of you online, as we bid farewell to the late Chengiah Ragaven. I know many of you that are here and many of you that are online may perhaps not understand our rituals, hence Laurel has asked me to give you a brief explanation as to what we're doing and why we're doing. So, Rogers has lived on this earth for some 90 plus years, his soul occupying that particular body. And now that Chengiah Rogers is no more, we are returning the body back to the elements. So when the funeral procession arrived at the crematorium, we commenced with the Ganesha praying, invoking Lord Ganesha as the remover of obstacles, to remove whatever obstacles we may have in today's prayers or procedures. We thereafter went on to perform what is known as the Harishchandra prayer. But it's not a Harishchandra prayer, it's known as the Harishchandra shrine, and it's a prayer for Lord Shiva. So Harishchandra in the ancient times used to be the person that used to actually burn the bodies. So when you went to the crematorium, you need to see him first, pay him his fee, give him some food, and he will do the cremation. In today's current system, it is not required because we pay Clara State a fee for the cremation. So we need not pay Harishchandra again because he's not going to cremate the body. We have many other Harishchandras that work here. But Harishchandra was known as somebody that never spoke a lie. He was known for his honesty, and hence it was made that Harishchandra should never be forgotten. Therefore, his shrine should be worshipped at every funeral. So we do the prayer for Lord Shiva because we have a holy trinity where Brahma is in charge of creation, Lord Vishnu is in charge of preservation, and Lord Shiva is in charge of destruction. Now that the soul no more occupies the physical body, we pray to Lord Shiva to destroy the body and return the 5 elements back to their origins. So once that prayer is done, we normally go straight into the antechambers. But here, just for some convenience for viewing, we have interrupted by 3 hours for the viewing and the speeches. And now we will proceed into the antechambers. Again, once we get into the antechambers, the immediate family members will come through to perform a ritual where we would offer ghee sticks and havan samagri. And all this is meant to make the burning procedure much more easier, without any obstacles, without the body burning too slow, without negative smells. So this is what all these prayers are done. And then we finally return the body to Mother Agni, which is fire, and eventually the physical body of our late Chengiah Ragaven will return to ash. And that is why we all use the white dot on our foreheads to remind ourselves that we all are eventually going to return to that form of ash. So when we are living, if you have this in mind, you do not have the time to have any pride. You do not have the time to have any arrogance. Now when you're living, you got a choice: economy, business, or first class. When you're booking into a hotel, you got no star, 3-star, 5-star, 7-star. You're booking into a restaurant, you can choose what you want. The only place where everybody levels up is at the cemetery or a cremation grounds. We do not have separate burial spaces for rich and poor. We do not have separate cremation facilities for rich and poor. This is a place where king or peasant, rich or poor, sick or healthy, no matter what your age, what your race, where everybody is seen as one. With these words, on behalf of the Ragaven family, we would like to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you for taking the time off and being here with them during this their time of bereavement. For all those of you that have rallied around to put the funeral arrangements together, for those of you that have contributed, whether in cash or in kind, for the various floral tributes, the messages of sympathies and condolences,
they would like to say a very big thank you to each and every one of you. On behalf of us at the Sipingo Funeral Services, we also take this opportunity to convey upon the bereaving family our heartfelt sympathies and condolences, and we pray to the Divine and Almighty that He should shower this family with His choicest of blessings and comforts in order for them to overcome this unbearable loss. Messages of sympathies and condolences also goes out to the family from Jaya and Joyce Snyder of Cape Town, Mano and Nancy Modley of Cape Town, and Mr. Maestri and family of Isipingo. If there's anyone that has not yet viewed, you may please do so now. We'll have the immediate family members come through to offer your goodbye roses, after which we will conclude and proceed to the antechambers. Once we have proceeded to the antechambers, due to the space restrictions and safety rules and regulations of the crematorium, unfortunately not everybody would be allowed inside. It would just be the immediate family members that would be allowed to do the necessary last rites and do the actual committal. The rest of you, we request you all to kindly make your way to the ghat, which is on my right-hand side, to partake of the refreshments that have been especially prepared for you. We're now going to call upon the immediate family members to come through and offer your goodbye roses. Thank you. నానా తండ్రివే ప్రియమైన దేవుడే ప్రేమ రూపము శాంత స్వరూపము నానా తండ్రివే ప్రియమైన దేవుడే ప్రేమ రూపము శాంత స్వరూపము నన్నే కాపాడి నన్నే రక్షించి బంగారు తండ్రినివే నన్నే కాపాడి నన్నే రక్షించి బంగారు తండ్రినివే కరుణించి ప్రాణించి ప్రియమైన దేవుడే కరుణించి ప్రాణించి ప్రియమైన దేవుడే మా దైవము నీవేగయ్యా మా దైవము నీవేగయ్యా నానా తండ్రివే ప్రియమైన దేవుడే ప్రేమ రూపము శాంత స్వరూపము శాంత స్వరూపము శాంత స్వరూపము నూరు పాటలు పాడితము ను మనసు మారాదయ్యా నా తండ్రి నా పైన దయలేదా నూరు పాటలు పాడితము ను మనసు మారాదయ్యా నా తండ్రి నా పైన దయలేదా రారాబులోకమాత రారా నన్ను కన్న తండ్రి రారాబులోకమాత రారా నన్ను కన్న తండ్రి పూజలు చేసితి భజనలు పాడి ను మనసు మారాదయా పూజలు చేసితి భజనలు పాడి ను మనసు మారాదయా నా కష్టములోన మా దుఃఖములోన నా పైన దయలేదా
నా కష్టములోన మా దుఃఖములోన నాపైన దయలేదా నూరు పాటలు పాడితము నువ్వు మనసు మారాదయ్యా నా తండ్రి నా పైన దయలేదా పూవలు కోరితి పాలు పండు పెట్టిను మనసు మారాదయ్యా పూవలు కోరితి పాలు పండు పెట్టిను మనసు మారాదయ్యా మా బంగారు తండ్రి మా బంగారు తండ్రి మమ్ము పాలించు సాలించయ్యా మా బంగారు తండ్రి మా బంగారు తండ్రి మా దైవము నీవేగయ్యా ఆ నూరు పాటలు పాడితము నువ్వు మనసు మారాదయ్యా నా తండ్రి నా పైన దయలేదా.
Let's all kindly rise for the concluding hymn.
रघुपति राघव राजा राम पतित पावन सीताराम रघुपति राघव राजा राम पतित पावन सीताराम सीताराम जय सीताराम सीताराम जय सीताराम भज मन प्यारे सीताराम ईश्वर अल्लाह तेरो नाम ईश्वर अल्लाह तेरो नाम सबको सलमति दे भगवान ईश्वर अल्लाह तेरो नाम सबको सन्मति दे भगवान रघुपति राघव राजा राम पतित पावन सीताराम असत्तु मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मा अमृतंगमय हरि हरि ओम शांति शांति शांति.
Could kindly have our pallbearers to come forward now. 6 to 8 gentlemen, please.
முத்தினரி அறியாது மூர்க்கரோடு முயல்வேனை பக்தினரி அறிவித்து பழவினைகள் பாரும் வண்ணு சித்தமள மரவித்து சிவமாக்கி என்னையாண்டு அத்தனனுக்கு அருளியவாறு
ஆர்பெருவர் அச்சோவே செம்மை நள மறியாத சீதடரோடு திரிவேனை மும்மை மழ மறவித்து முதலாய முதல் வந்தால் நம்மையும் ஓர் பொருளாக்கி நாட்சிவிகை ஏற்ற வைத்து அம்மையனுக்கு கருளியவார் ஆர்பெருவர் அச்சோவே ஓம் திருற்றம்பலம் ஓம் சாந்தி சாந்தி சாந்தி. Thank you. If you all can kindly make your way to the guard to partake of the refreshments that has been especially provided for you. Once again, we request you, please do make your way there because the family has really overcated. Thank you.